Hello, in this video we're going to talk about the approaches, position, and regulation sections of settings here. We're going to skip payroll and come back to that one since that's a little more lengthy topic. First, the approaches section. This is for logging approaches that you may fly. I'm going to go straight to the ILS section here. We can see I can change the title of it if I like. I can hide the ILS selection if I never fly ILS approaches, so this is a bad example to show for that, but I could turn off the ILS so it will not show up in the list of approaches when I'm logging flights. I do have a percentage list here. 28% of the approaches I have logged have been ILS. 27% of those have been in the last 27% in the last 90 days. I do not have a default approach type set, so the approach field will be blank when I create new flights or when I fly additional flights. I cannot delete the approach for ILS because it is a default entry in APDL. I can deselect it as we said earlier. We also have a long list of other approaches here. Visual approach. If you'd rather have visual listed for all of your approaches that are not instrument approaches, you could choose visual instead of none as your default, and that would be pre-entered for you. Additionally, we can create custom approaches. So let's say I want to keep track of Category 2 ILS approaches. I can save that. Now that'll come up down here in my custom list. Again, I can hide that. I can set it as the default if I like, or I can delete this approach since I created it as a custom approach and I have not logged this type of approach yet. Approaches is a pretty simple section. Moving on to the position section here. So it's pretty straightforward. We have by default 2 positions and 2 different roles for each position here. That's a captain and first officer, and then pilot flying and pilot monitoring for each one of those. The check mark here, I'm sure you can figure out at this point, stands for that's the default position. Also, it's indicated with a note here at the bottom, and 100% of the flights that have been logged have been chosen as captain pilot flying. Opening up the captain pilot flying position here, we can change the name of it if we like. A couple of options here. Is this pilot in command? In the case of being captain, that's true, so we check that, and that'll be basically crediting us with pilot in command time whenever this is transferred over to your logbook. Pilot flying, yes, it is pilot flying, so I'm going to get credit for the instrument time, the landings, things of that nature. In this case, there is a separate option for credit landing, so I do want to credit the landing because I was a pilot flying. And then do I want to automatically enter the landing as a night landing if APDL determines that the landing was performed at night. All these are defaulted to be turned on. You can change them if you wish, but this is the way APDL ships. This is set as the default position. I can set any other position as default. If I choose default now, it's not going to change anything because we already are default. We'll move into the pilot monitoring section. We notice everything's the same except the options section here. This is still pilot in command. However, it's not pilot flying. Does not get a credit for landing, and of course, it's not going to be a night landing if you didn't do the landing at all. For first officer, just the flip-flop, not pilot in command, but in this case, it is pilot flying if it's FOPF. And then, of course, FOPM, all these are disabled. You can create custom positions if you like. For example, if you are a line check airman, you could call this line check airman, and let's say left seat, for example. And you could say, oh, I'm pilot in command in that case. May or may not be pilot flying. So you could add PF. I'm going to say, yep, I'm the pilot flying. I did the landing, and I'm going to get credit if it's night. I can set this as the default if I choose, or I can delete it since it is a custom position. All right, moving on to the regulations section. This is a relatively short section here. The default in this case is Part 117 unaugmented, as indicated by the check mark. For automatic, that's 100% of our entries have been automatic in this case. Let's talk about the automatic section, or the automatic regulation option first. The automatic selection is used by default on all of your entries. What that does is it uses an algorithm to determine, based on the types of flights that you've entered for that day, what your most appropriate regulation matches, or what regulation most appropriately matches the type of flying you've done that day. If APDL cannot determine what regulation to apply to your day, it will revert back to what your default setting is. In this case, that's Part 117 unaugmented. So that's why we have the default check mark down here for 117 unaugmented, yet 100% of the entries have been automatic in this case. And as we can see, the note at the bottom reflects that automatic will select the appropriate regulation type. Otherwise, we're going to default to 117 unaugmented. So I could select any of these sections as a default if I like. And there's not very many settings that we can adjust, just really setting the default. Well, that does it for this video. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.